Off, shall we, with Space Hulk, 66% off. That is $10.19, €9.51, £7.81. For the purposes of this video, any US dollar price will be the same as the Australian price, unless otherwise stated. Space Hulk, I'm afraid, is not very good. It's not that the board game itself isn't good, it's actually one of my personal favorites. The problem is the adaptation is particularly weak. Low quality assets, poor production values, horrible desyncing animations, all sorts of things like bullets clipping through walls, and nonsense like that. Very little effort has actually been put into this particular conversion, and that is certainly a problem with Games Workshop stuff. We even saw it, of course, with Cyanide's Blood Bowl, although at least they did put a bit of effort into expanding the number of rules and modes available. Space Hulk doesn't do any of that. In my opinion, it's a rather cynical cash-in on nostalgia for those of us who very much grew up in the 80s and 90s and enjoyed this game in its original form from Games Workshop. If you want to know what it is, well, it's a tabletop turn-based strategy game whereby you control a set of Space Marine Terminators as you attempt to accomplish various missions against Genestealer hordes. It's very dice-driven, but it's also quite strategic, and it's a fantastic game to play if you can get the tabletop, and good luck because it's out of print. But unfortunately, the adaptation, in my opinion, is just not good enough to justify the price. Of course, if you want to check out further information about that, I did do a video on it, and you can click on the screen right now to find that. Batman Arkham Origins, 50% off. That is $25, €25, and £20. Warning for this one, that's a pretty good price, but it's actually better on Green Man Gaming. There's quite a few titles that often are, because Green Man Gaming is matching some of the prices of the Steam sale, and they're also giving a 20% off coupon, which stacks on top of that. The details for the coupon are also in the description below this video, along with a link to the website. For full disclosure, by the way, the link that I've put in there is a referral link, and I earn a small amount of money if you spend money on the site. If you don't want to give me that, that's absolutely fine. The main link to the site is greenmangaming.com. Now, if you've never used GMG before, generally they just give you Steam codes, so it's pretty much the same thing. Though every now and again you do have to use their application, which is Capsule, to actually download the installer. You can check whether or not that's the case on the page. It will tell you whether or not you get a Steam key. If you're not a fan of GMG, you can get it a little bit cheaper on Amazon on the 26th. This is scheduled to go on sale on Amazon in their game deals just after Christmas, and that'll cost you $20 instead of $25. That's probably only going to be US only, though, as a lot of their normal download stuff actually is. So there you go. There's a selection of ways that you can do that. And as to whether or not the game's any good, I personally quite liked it. I thought the PC port was pretty solid. It actually had a lot of good options, and it ran very well on my system. However, initially the game was quite glitchy, quite similar to Arkham City. There was a bug that didn't allow you to go on any further. And some would argue, and I think that they would be correct in doing so, that it's a bit of a step down from Arkham City and didn't really add all that much. Yeah, it's a very similar game to Arkham City. There's no real question about that. And if you haven't played City, you're better off going for that one, because overall it is a better game, I would say. And you can also get it hella cheap right now in its Game of the Year form. And that's actually had the really nasty Games for Windows Live stuff taken out of it. So that was actually causing bugs, and there's a horrible piece of DRM that's now gone. But I think it's a pretty solid Batman game. I had a lot of fun with it. I enjoyed the various locales and the various villains involved in it, particularly the fact that a lot of those villains are perhaps lesser known. I wouldn't say it's a better game than City, though, but it is a really solid game in its own right. Assetto Corsa, which I believe is actually Italian for racing setup. This is 25% off, taking it down to $30, €26.24, and £22.49. Okay, the reason I wouldn't recommend this is, one, it's on early access. And when it comes to early access, I would say in 90% of circumstances, unless you are very invested in the idea of this game, you should never buy a title on early access. You just should not do it. Now, in the case of Assetto Corsa, this is a game that is supposedly a very moddable racing simulation. And it's actually got a lot of praise already from people because its physics engine is actually excellent, and it also has rather exceptional graphical fidelity. However, it is something of a hardcore racing sim, so if you don't have a racing wheel and you're not willing to deal with the early access nature, or just don't know an awful lot about racing games, this is probably one to avoid. It's not one of the easier titles to pick up. it could end up being absolutely phenomenal as a result of having exceptional mod support right out of the box. But at this price and in this state, I would say that it's hard to recommend. Please do not count that as a denunciation of the title. It will no doubt be amazing once it eventually ends up coming out in its full form, but right now, it's not finished. So unless you're big into racing games, it's probably safer to avoid. Dead Island, 75% off. That takes it down to $5, €5, and £5. There's also Dead Island Riptide, which is a little more expensive, but 75% off regardless. This is a game that I would recommend if you want some really dumb fun in co-op. However, the original had a few too many problems, in my opinion, to be a full recommendation. At that price, though, it's a little bit easier to argue for. I definitely think Riptide is a better game than Dead Island, but it also didn't advance the series all that much. It does have less bugs and less problems, although I did suffer particularly from some field of view issues, and trying to switch the field of view in the .ini files actually caused my gun to recoil backwards, which was very, very strange indeed. I'm hoping they fixed that by now, but I haven't actually played it since launch, so that's something to consider there. I had a decent amount of fun with Riptide in single player, but again, it is definitely a stronger title if you go down the multiplayer route, because, well, it's with friends, and, you know, any game is more fun with friends, and there is a certain amount of synergy involved in the different classes and characters, so that is something to consider there as well. It's definitely a janky game, as a lot of Techland stuff is, but I like the concept of it. The crafting system is a little ridiculous, as is the loot system, which frankly has no place in that game, but it's there anyway, and it's actually quite fun to do, and the melee combat against the zombies is actually incredibly enjoyable. So on that basis, I would recommend it as a piece of dumb fun. Just do not expect polish